Kelly Shaw, Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization. These are the pine cones I was out looking for. I'm on French Gulch Road. It's where a Bigfoot sighting happened by a guy that was collecting these at night. He grew up in the area. I don't know if you guys can hear the birds vocalizing. But anyway, the guy who grew up in the area or come up here with his grandparents all the time, and they would collect these pine cones and they would make things out of them during the holidays. And these are like the size of pineapples. I mean, one of these fall out of the tree, it's going to knock you out and leave you a big bloody goose egg. So anyway, he was collecting these pine cones and a Bigfoot come down, and he actually got to see the actual Bigfoot that started harassing him when he was picking these up right here in French Gulch. I'm sure I'm not in the exact spot that he pulled over, but this is what he was getting. He was putting them in the back of his truck. I'm going to pick up the camera, scan around the area, and tell you about his Bigfoot sighting that happened on this stretch of road.
Man collecting pine cones retreats from Intimidation approach above French Gulch near Lake Shasta. In early June 1991, French Gulch, California, my son and I took a short vacation to my childhood memory place in French Gulch, where I remembered an eerie thing that happened back in the 60s with my father. I'd lived with my grandparents in a small town called Summit City, just a few miles below Shasta Lake Dam, when my father one day took me to French Gulch, way back deep into the woods, north and northeast of the French Gulch town. I remember always feeling as though being watched, and sometimes heard really eerie sounds. I remember the eerie sound that made this worse for me to be comfortable. I was a naturalist, though, and always felt drawn to the deep woods, and so it was hard to keep me away. In later years, after retiring from the U.S. Army, I took a trip visiting relatives in Redding, and one evening I packed up the truck for a deep adventure back into the woods, and I was mostly there to get the big pine cones with the delicious pine nuts. We left late that evening, getting there as it turned dark, and I felt my memories would help me find the places that I had been with a teen with my dad when we would park and wake up near an old cabin. It was as if I could practically reach out to the stars that clear, bright night, as well as the moon was out partially. Some of the ledges on those high peaks were a bit scary driving by them. It was so dark and far down I couldn't see how far. Then after about 3 hours of this turn and that turn and many miles, I'd forgot to count, and my son fell asleep. I became tired and stopped. I turned off the truck engine and left the headlights on, as I saw so many pine cones about a foot and longer. I began to load a few up. I had a camper shell on a little Plymouth Arrow pickup truck, and we could lock ourselves in for the night when the time came. Before I stopped, I just turned the truck around on the road so it made it easier to load some of the pine cones. As I got out, I began loading more pine cones. That is when I heard the noise. It was very close. I was petrified at the sound, as it was nothing like the elk calls that sound a bit eerie too. I began to slowly pick up a few more pine cones, as these were only for decorating during the Christmas seasons, like we did in my childhood days. I would get the green ones that would last through autumn, and still some of the pines on the trees. I had reached down to pick up the 5th pine cone, and it was then I just froze and fully panicked fear. I could hear up the side of the ridge to my right, clearly a pounding of what sounded like something very large. Only 2 distant sounds pounding the ground, and the damn thing was coming fast. I dropped the pine cones at once and ran up to the driver's side, fumbling in fear with the door, trying to get in the truck. Then I started the truck up and was trying to put it in first gear and jammed it in just as I let out the clutch, awakening my 7-year-old son. I heard the sound coming down right behind the rear of the truck. Just before I got the truck started, I happened to look back into the darkness behind the truck as it darted forward and into the dimness of the tail lights. I seen this awful dark hairy figure standing upright behind the truck. The moon and the stars were out, which helped me see this figure form as well. I had been stricken with so much fear that I had never known before at that moment, and nearly drove off the side of the road when my son said, "Dad, watch out!" I then nearly flipped the truck over, just missing a small log. I had no gun with me. I would have not feared what it was and would have shot in the air as a warning shot if I had to. It was that darn eerie sound and the sound of the thing coming down the steep hillside, and at that second, the issue of absolute fear of not having any defense. That got my spirit stirred. I knew for sure it wasn't a bear, as the memory is still just as plain to see today. It took a while before my son got to me to say what happened on the way back, as I was burrowing down the mountain as fast as I could, and I'm surprised I didn't forget each turn I made to make on the roads as I chose out the way back. We pulled into French Gulch when daylight was breaking, and I had to stop and sleep for an hour or so. When my son woke me up whining about being hungry, I woke up a bit dazed, and it came back to me what had happened, and I started the truck and headed for Redding. My son was teasing me. "Oh, Dad, it was probably just a bear." We reached Uncle Bill's place, right side of the road, before Redding, where he lived on a property of his brother's wife's father, an Italian who passed away. Still to this day, my son teases me at age 23. I was a ranch caretaker a few years back in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I had seen a lot of things and heard a lot of things, but nothing that could even compare to what I experienced on that early morning above French Gulch. I surely didn't want to. I always carried a gun with me on that ranch, just south of the Rogers Dry Lake, even in the surrounding woods. There were signs posted before entering that forest north of French Gulch, stating to keep out during the evening and night, and cut for firewood only during daylight hours. I hadn't been there for so many years and wanted to experience what I remembered as a teen, but I sure wouldn't have if I had known what I had encountered that night. I'm very serious because I've studied the Sasquatch or Bigfoot ever since, and would go with someone else today and be a lot more prepared for such a venture, but never again alone, like that night, and without some serious protection. I have never heard of what this big beast has come up on someone like me and acting like it did, but it sure did with me. I hope someone gets some physical evidence because I haven't enjoyed being teased all these years. Also, we could put an end to the mystery of this beast. I have known what it was like to have big bears visit at night up in the high country of Colorado mountains, Rabbit Ear Mountain Pass area where I camped with wife and our firstborn. I've been around the world and seen a lot of things from the mountains in West Germany and in South Korea, in the Mingdung Mountains where the Siberian tiger still remained back in 1975. In all those years, I've never had such a scare. My body and hands were trembling, and I was scared down to the core of my being. Sincerely, Sergeant, Retired U.S. Army. A follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Richard Hucklebridge. On the evening of April 9, 2007, this witness and I talked for well over an hour discussing the encounter. It happened above the mining area of French Gulch, California, back in June of 1991. One of the reasons that MLD went into the wilderness area was to try and show his son where he and his father and uncle used to go when he was his age. He never found the exact spot, but when he found the large pine cones, he thought that was enough progress for that night, and he was tired as well. He turned his pickup truck around, leaving the lights on. He got out of his truck and opened up the camper shell door and picked up the tailgate. He began to gather up large pine cones and put them into the back of the truck. As he was picking up the pine cones, he heard the eerie screech coming from the ridge behind his truck. He dropped the pine cones he had gathered and started to make a retreat. He then heard some loud thumping sounds that were getting louder as they approached him. They sounded like 2 large feet hitting the ground, and as they got closer, that sound plus the screeching sound immediately before made him tremble with fear. He knew that it wasn't a bear or an elk or anything else that he knew about that lives in that forest. As he closed the door of his truck and started up the engine, he observed a large dark form in his rearview mirror moving towards his truck. The figure was slightly illuminated by the truck taillights. There was also some moonlight that helped define the figure. He saw it for about 5 seconds. He could only see from the shoulders down to its knees. It was an upright, man-like figure. In estimation, it weighed several hundred pounds. He could see the shoulders. One of its arms hung down, and the other appeared to be moving up as the figure was moving towards the truck. The fur seemed shaggy, but the body looked very strong and muscular. He thought the hair on the chest was shorter than the hair on its arms. He recalled that the figure seemed to have a reddish tone to its fur, but he thinks that was probably the tail light's reflection. The open camper shell door shielded the tail light illumination from the shoulders of the figure on up. MLD is a disabled Army veteran. He was wounded in action. I thanked him for his service and sacrifices for his country. I also thanked him for the story of his encounter. This incident shook this gentleman to his core, and it still bothers him. He felt as if he was trespassing on something's protected property. My wife and I took the same road about 12 to 15 years ago when we wanted to see some backcountry by going through Redding and then up Highway 5 to Lakehead, which is located on the north end of Lake Shasta. We decided to take this road out of French Gulch going north Dog Creek Road and then east of Highway 5 and then south to Lakehead. My wife still remembers the weird wood cutting sign that MLD described. I received the 2 email messages on 4/10/7. Richard, what it's worth, I remember another thing when I was visiting Shasta Dam. I had spent much time up at the dam as a teen. I remembered a few hours later after speaking to you, when I visited the dam, I went inside with my son and signed the visitor's book. This accounted for my presence in the Redding area for that time period, for that year and day, June 1991, approximately the 12th or the 15th of June, and the trip to French Gulch was at least 2 days after the visit to Shasta Dam. All my son can account for was the situation as he woke up and saw me driving and very scared. He remembers how scared I was and remembers me talking about it once in a while. He was little back then, and it was hard to explain at his age what I had seen. He did hear the conversation with his great Uncle Bill and his Uncle Bill teasing me, but Uncle Bill declined to go back up there with me when I teased him to come back. He was a Bronze Star war hero that saved many lives in some of the famous battles in the Korean War. He's got 2 Purple Hearts, but he got pretty jittery about going up to French Gulch area. He wouldn't have any part of it. It's hard when one does not know what they are up against, the unknown. When this happened to me that night, it was the unknown that I was faced with. Great Bigfoot sighting report, very squatchy area. This area and the surrounding area is just full of Bigfoot sightings. I really like the story. The gentleman is still shook to the core to this day, and we like Bigfooting in the area because there's so many Bigfoot sighting reports. I mean, it's Northern California. It has the second most Bigfoot sighting reports in the world. It's definitely a Bigfoot sighting hot spot. I hope you guys enjoyed this story that this guy submitted to BFRO and the BFRO investigator follow-up interview with the guy. Keep on watching. We're going to keep on squatching.
Okay, we've been right here where we stopped to get these pine cones for this Bigfoot sighting report. This is the second deer carcass or dead animal that we've found.
I don't know what that is. I think it's a deer.
It looks like it's part of a deer. Something's been eating animals here.